Oh, you're right. Oops.
Everybody, at this point, I would like to call to order the Budget and Finance Commission meeting for November 12th, 2020. And at this time, we will do our roll call. Commissioner Marin.
Present.
Commissioner Wynn.
Here.
Commissioner Samples.
Here.
Commissioner Woodham.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson, absent, and Commissioner Solomon, absent. All right, the next order of the agenda will be the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me by placing your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Okay. Next order of business is the approval of the order of agenda. Would anyone like to change the order of agenda at this time? Seeing none, would somebody care to move to approve the order of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. Seeing a motion and a second, we will do a roll call vote. A roll call vote. All right. Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
All right, and the chair votes aye as well. Thank you. The next order of the agenda is blue folder items. We do have a couple of blue folder items tonight. These are items that are additional backup materials to administrative reports and or public comments received after printing and distribution of the agenda packet to receive and file. Is there a motion to receive and file our blue folder items?
Yeah, so moved. Approved.
And a second?
Second.
Seeing a motion and a second, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
All right, and the chair votes aye as well. Blue folder items are now received and filed. That brings us to our consent calendar. Business items except those formally noticed for public hearing or discussion are assigned to the consent calendar. The commission members may request that any consent calendar items be removed, discussed, and acted upon separately. Items removed from the consent calendar will be taken up under the excluded consent calendar section below. Those items remaining on the consent calendar will be approved in one motion. The chair will call on anyone wishing to address the commission on any consent calendar items on the agenda which have not been pulled by the commission for discussion. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once, and comments will be limited to a total of 3 minutes. Would any of the commission members like to pull any of the consent calendar items for discussion at this time? Okay, seeing no response, do we have any member of the public, Zoom, or e-comments on any consent calendar items?
We have nobody on Zoom.
No e-comments.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve items F1 through F3 of the consent calendar?
Motion to approve.
And a second?
Second. Second.
Seeing a motion and second, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Consent calendar items are now received and filed. I don't see that we have any excluded consent calendar items, so we will move on to public participation on non-agenda items. This section is intended to provide members of the public with the opportunity to comment on any subject that does not appear on this agenda for action. This section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker, including those by Zoom, will be afforded 3 minutes to address the commission. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once. Written requests, including e-comments, if any, will be considered first under this section. Do we have any public participation of non-agenda items tonight?
Not on Zoom.
No e-comments.
Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda is items continued from previous agendas. Seeing none, we can move on to items for discussion prior to action. Item J1 will be presented by Marnie Rulin and Mr. Glitzman. Are we ready for that, Marnie?
We are ready. So last week we gave you an overview of a self-insurance fund and talked about the various expenditures that are recorded to that fund and also the revenue sources. This month we're going to take a look at one of those expenditures, which is recording the projected outstanding losses. And we get those amounts from actuarial reports that Mr. Glicksman prepares for us. And so you have those reports, and we'll also share the screen so you can see it as we go through. But Mr. Glicksman is going to walk you through the studies.
Is everybody ready? You ready?
We're ready.
Want to make sure you can hear me. Okay.
Yep.
Marnie, you're gonna sort of be my assistant. You're gonna be Vanna White.
Yeah, Diane is doing it actually.
Okay.
I'm Vanna tonight.
Could you go through the report into table 1 on PDF? Keep going. Right there. That would be table 1. That's the outstanding losses. I'm going to go through this, and I don't know you're familiar with actuarial work, so I'm going to go at the pace that I think is right, but you can push me along or slow me down how you want to go. So these numbers really are, if the city went, this is for workers' comp, not liability. So this is the workers' comp program. And if the city went out of business and decided, we don't want to be a city, and you closed the doors on June 30th, 2020, the number you see there, the 20,207,000, that would be the face value of the checks that you need to write to all the injured workers. So if a worker was hurt June 30th, 20 and prior, and you're paying that claim after June 30th, that would be in the 20,207,000. Okay? Now, all those payments aren't going to be made today. They're going to take 20, 30 years to pay. If you were to get 2% on the money that you're investing, you could put into the bank 17,993. And if you would get, if you were lucky enough to get 4%, you can put in 16,266. It's pretty straightforward. So it's a stream of payments. You're going to be making a stream of payments to the injured workers over time. And depending on your interest rate, you can have less money in the bank because you're going to get more interest income. If you got no interest income, it would be 20,207,000. Okay? Okay. Next page, please, Marnie.
Quick question on the discount rate for those payments.
Yeah.
Are we using 4%? And if so, how did we arrive at that discount rate, and what difference does it make?
Is that a Glicksman question or a Marnie question?
I'll take it. It is, we are using 4%. City Council arrived at that amount in their policy direction. They asked us to do a 4% rate and a 75% confidence level. They decided that, and I don't know how many years ago, but many. I would say at least 5, if not longer. So 4% probably made more sense back when they did it than it does today. But
Let me take some of that question, okay? Couple things on the question. One is whether you're using 4% or 2% or 10% for that matter, this is going to be payments over 20 years. So just because the current interest rate environment is pretty close to zero, doesn't mean that next year it won't be higher. So at some level, you really don't have to be getting that much money today. It's anticipated over the life of the program. That would be one thing. The second thing is, I heard Marnie mention the 75% confidence level. I'm going to go into that a little bit later with you, explaining what that is. But on balance, if you're going to fund it at a, it's not exactly so, but it's pretty close. If they're going to be funding at a 4% discount rate, 75% confidence level, it's pretty much the same thing as that. You see there the actuarial central estimate, 20 million. And by the way, when I tell you the number, and I'm going to go into this later, when I tell you the number is 20 million, it's not like I know exactly that's the number. Okay, I don't. In fact, this is going to sound kind of like weaselly, but what that really means is that half the time your actual number will be higher and half the time the actual number will be lower. It's a little bit like saying that if you walk down the street and you see an average person of 5'9", nobody is exactly 5'9" if you have enough decimal points, but that would be the average. So that's what that 20 million represents. Okay, was your question answered?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, next page, Marnie.
One other question there. So you started out with the comment that if the city went out of business on June 30th, that would be the number. What you're really saying is if we had no employees effective June 30th, but the city was still in business, that would still be the liability, right?
Yeah, I meant that. Yeah,
okay.
That's correct,
Okay.
Of course.
Okay.
Right. If everyone in the city was laid off or fired or quit.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Keep going. Oh, one of the things I want to mention is, and I didn't mention this earlier, is I don't know if you were familiar with what a 4850 benefit is. Is everyone in the room familiar with what they are?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, when police or fire, and the reason why I'm saying police and fire because that's the section of the code. If a firefighter is hurt, he or she gets full salary continuance for 1 year. So let's say that the firefighter is making, I'm going to make it, and I'm really making up these numbers. I have no idea. I'm doing it for simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the most you can get in workers' comp is 800 a week, but the firefighter is getting 1,000 a week. My number only goes up to the 800. The extra $200 comes out of salary. So it's a different expense. So my numbers go up to the statutory maximum of workers' compensation. It doesn't include the extra benefits that the state might throw on. And for example, I don't know if your city does this, but most do. Even if any worker is hurt, they may get 60 days of salary continuance. My numbers would only include actual workers' comp. It doesn't include any extra goodies or benefits the state or the city gives them. Okay, move on, Marnie, please.
How do we get visibility into what that exposure might be?
I have the numbers. I don't have them handy, but
Okay. Well, but I guess it would be based on approximate numbers of employee by job classification to figure out what that overhead would be, right?
No. It would be about all the workers that have been hurt, and it would be pretty much just counting heads.
Okay.
Is what it would be, counting heads and multiplying it by the money.
I think we have reports that we've provided that might have laid it out by department, like fire department and number of claims that we have, police department number of claims, and those people get 4850 benefits for a year. Miscellaneous workers do not.
Okay. I don't.
It's usually a few $100,000 a year.
Okay. I don't recall seeing that, but good information. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
That's
Next page.
strictly, can you hear me, Mr. Glicksman?
I can.
Okay, is that under 4850, is that strictly base salary, or is that base salary plus benefits?
I don't know.
It's base plus special compensation, and it's part of California Labor Code 4850, and they define what it is. So we have to pay base and special comp.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Diane. Next page, keep moving a little bit if you can, Marnie. Thank you. Okay, there you see the comparison. Just raise it a little bit higher. If you see the comparison, I have the number this year is 20,207,000. And last time I did the work last year, it was 18.7, so it's up about 1.5 million. And that's because you've had a couple of claims back in 15, 16 and 17, 18 that have gone sideways on you. You know, an example might be, and this is not what happened, but this would be an example where someone has, you think they just have an injured back and they're out of work, and then you find out a year later that they actually need disc replacement. So a claim that you thought maybe was going to be $50,000 is now $500,000. That can happen several years after a claim happens. Just like anything else on medical. You know, if somebody injures their back, they may even be able to go back to work for a short period of time, and then they realize only a year later just how miserable the injury is. So it's like anything else on medical. You know, the sooner you get better, great. But if you don't get better and you're still out on workers' comp, not so good. Okay, you want to move forward now? Thanks. Okay, this is table 1-2. And this, if before of what I gave you was the world stopped on June 30th of 20, this is people that are going to be hurt during 2021. So if someone was hurt before June 30th, it was in the 20 million I showed you before. If they're hurt in the fiscal year 2021, then the average cost is going to be 3.5 million. You can discount it, and if it's a discounted 4%, it's 2,872,000.
Is that projected per person or total losses?
I wish it was per person. Well, not really. If I was an injured worker, I wish it was per person. No, that would be all the claims.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all the claims. I mean,
now, does that take into consideration the overtime and the other risks that we're experiencing in this fiscal year that are different from prior fiscal years?
Well, this is workers' comp, so this wouldn't include those expenses. A person gets 2/3 of their pre-injury salary up to, I don't know what the California maximum is, but let's say it was $1,000 a week, could be 12, something like that.
I guess maybe I didn't phrase that very well. Since March of this year, our public safety personnel in particular have been working a lot of overtime in a much higher risk environment than what they were exposed to in 2019. So
Right.
Your numbers here, do they take that into consideration, or is there a way even to quantify that to take into?
That's a really good question, actually, and I'm going to answer it in a way that you probably don't expect. First, I did the work back on March 31st. One of the things the city does is they want it done earlier, before June 30th. So all this report was done pre-COVID. Okay? So there's no anticipation of COVID in this. But let me add something else to it. It is true that your law enforcement folks may have more claims. But what I found for most public agencies, actually, is that, well, maybe not cities as much as school districts, but actually costs for workers' comp have gone down. And the reason for that is a lot of people are working at home.
Mm-hmm.
And now that doesn't mean that, one of the things I was worried about originally was if you're working at home at a kitchen table, how's your back going to be? It's not meant to work at. But that hasn't been the case. It's turned out that, that people working at home are getting injured less. And the kind of people that usually get injured besides law enforcement are people that are fixing roads and things like that. I don't know how much that would change.
Right. Well, I was thinking in particular, our fire and EMS folks, actually public safety in general, because they continue to have exposure to the public. And I guess I was just trying to figure out, is there a way this early on to figure out what that risk may look like?
Generally from what I've seen, it's actually been less. For example, I do a lot of Florida clients. being in Boca Raton, and their fiscal year ends on September 30th. And I've done a lot of counties, big counties. I mean, like Palm Beach County and Hillsborough County, some of the larger counties, and their workers' comp costs are actually less this year than they were before.
Really? Okay. Good. Good.
Yeah, but what's that?
I was going to say, Diane or Marnie, without obviously naming any names, do we have any public safety personnel that are out on workers' comp and it's attributed to COVID?
We did have a few that were in training capacity, and they were younger, and they returned to work after about 4 days. So they did have it. They got tested positive, went through the treatment, and returned to work very quickly.
And it was considered work-related, and so they got workers' comp.
Yes, it is effective. I think July 1. All COVID cases are work-related in California. So
okay, thank you.
We've been very fortunate, though.
I'm not making light of COVID when I say this, but the average age of a person that dies is 82 years old.
Yeah.
That's the median age. I don't think you have too many employees that are over 82. I mean,
You'd be surprised.
It only feels like it.
But it's a disease. Unfortunately, it's a disease of the vulnerable, right? And those people aren't working. Okay. Want to move on, Diane, a little bit? I mean, Marnie, I apologize. Okay, this is the comparison to the previous. And actually, no, go back. Last year when I did the work for 1920, it was actually higher projection of future losses than this year. Now, that has nothing to do with COVID. That has to do with the fact that most of the high-cost claims that you've had are several years old. And for the last, I'm going to show you a little later, most of your last 2 years have actually been pretty good for workers' comp. And please don't ask me for the reason why. I'm going to say it's because Marnie and Diane are doing a great job. But the truth is, I don't know. Okay, move on. I'm going to go a little bit further to some pages that have some numbers on it. They're going to have a lot of numbers on it, but it's not all that complicated once I walk through it with you. Okay, keep going. Okay, stop. So this is what, PDF 24? And if you're having a hard time reading it and you want to look on your own computer screen, this is PDF 24. I'll give everybody a minute to get there. I'm lucky. My father is 89 years old and doesn't wear glasses. So. Let me know, is everybody ready for me to move on?
Go ahead and finish.
Mr. Woodham?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so this table I do like a 5-year projection. And if you look, I'm looking in the top section and I'm looking down column 3 and you'll see that number that we're familiar with, that 20,207. That's what I think I actually think that's what I think the face value of the checks that you're going to write for all the injured workers are if the city went out of business or if all the employees quit or they were all fired. And you can see that next year, right now, I think next year, the number is going to be slightly less and it's going to pretty much hug the $20 million mark for the next 5 years. The reason for that is, what that really means is that you're accruing new claims in Section 2 about at the same rate that you're paying off old claims in Section 3. Excuse me. Section 2 is you're accruing new claims. You'll see that number on right in the middle over there, that number, that 3,515 that we saw before. That's the new claims in 2021. The reason why, if you look a little bit to the left, you see the 874. The reason for that is it's only a quarter of a year. It's from April 1 to July. And you can see that the losses are increasing slightly, 100 or 200,000 each year. It's mostly because of inflation. Maybe you'll hire a few more employees. The bottom row of numbers is cash out the door. That's the face value of the checks that you're going to write each year. Questions?
It appears to be holding, I was just going to say, so it appears to be holding pretty steady. The inflation, the increase is due to inflation along with some new hires. It's pretty stable.
Well, no one knows what the right answer is going to be, right? I mean, you could have,
That's what you're for.
This is just a good guess. It's not
I understand.
right. It's just a good guess. It's, if the number turns out, and remember, it's like a bell curve, right? It's just as likely it's going to be higher as lower. It's like walking down the street and saying you're 5'9" to every person you see, when nobody's actually that height.
All right.
Okay, next page, please. This is more of an accounting thing. Again, you'll see that number we've been looking at for a while, the 20,207,000. And what I'm doing is I'm breaking this up into current, which are payable within the next year, and long-term, which are payable after the year. And the auditors like this kind of stuff. Next page, please. This is the confidence level. Now, I want to explain confidence levels to you in a way that I hope you get it. First of all, when you see the number that says estimated outstanding losses, and again, you're going to see, I'm in the top row, I'm looking down column 3A, and you'll see that number we're familiar with, 20,207,000. Now, a confidence level means how sure am I that you're going to have enough money? Now, I told you that's the bell curve, right? So that means half the time you'll have not enough money, and half the time you'll have too much money. It's a bell curve. But let's say you want to move over to the right on the bell curve and you want to be 75% sure. Well, then you're going to need 21,506,000. So you're going to need a little more money. It's a little bit like your, I'm going to use the height example again. If you think the average person is 5'9", but you see an average person, how do you want to be 75% sure that he's not taller? So you may say 5'11". And if you want to be 80% sure, you may say 6 foot. And if you want to be 90% sure, you may say 6'4".
Is the 2207 number then a 70% confidence level?
Well, it's not exactly a 50% because the shape of the curve really isn't a bell curve. But for the discussion, it's 50%.
50%. Okay.
Yeah, it's not exactly 50%, but I want you to be able to visualize what's going on. It's actually, for those of you that like math, it's actually a log normal curve. So it's skewed a little bit to the right. But because you can't have zero losses, less than zero losses, right? In a bell curve, you could have less than zero. So with this, it's done so that you have to have 0 or more. I mean, in theory, right? In theory, you can never have 100% money because every person that works for the city, in theory, could make a claim. So you can never have 100%. But if you wanted to be 90% sure you had enough, you'd have to probably pump in 22,849. You'd have to add about 2.6 million, and you'd be 90% sure. I do the same thing on the funding along the second row. If you look in 3A, you'll see the 3,515,000. We saw that number before. And if you wanted to be 75% sure, you got to put in 3.9. If you wanted to be 90% sure, you'd have to put in 4.4. Now, here's something that I wanted to mention that was interesting. If the city is going to actually fund, or likes to fund, discounted at 4%, and the 75% confidence level. Go to the next page, please, Marnie. Okay, so I'm looking here, and just so you know, if you look at along the top row, if you look at 4B, you'll see the 17,312. That's what the city is going to put aside. I mean, 4% is a pretty heavy-duty interest rate. I would have to say that, in all the clients I work with, unless they're being super aggressive, they're not doing that. But actually, most of them don't even have money in the bank to pay for losses. So whatever interest rate they put is fictitious anyway, even if it's 0.1%.
Marnie, you said that 4% was derived by the city council.
Yes.
And it sounds like Mr. Glitzman's saying that that's fairly aggressive. Can you tell us in a sentence or two how they came up with an aggressive number like that?
Like I said, it was quite a while ago. I know that they had some input, but I cannot recall who that input was from. But it's not a recent decision.
That gets back to my question earlier when I asked about it. If it doesn't make any difference, then I don't guess we need to be concerned about whether it's 2% or 4%. But clearly, if this is a critical factor, if we're paying based on 4%, then it's different than just an estimate based upon 4%, which I gather this is. So sounds like it doesn't matter whether it's 2% or 4%. Is that correct, Mr. Gibson?
If you're asking me, I don't know if the city has the money in the bank getting any money. You know, to me, it's just an accounting number. You know, the city probably wants to book an accounting number that makes sense, and it's all good.
No one is making anywhere close to 4% on a fixed income asset right now, unless it's high yield, and no one has more than a small percentage of their funds in high yield.
Right.
So the number is fictitious, but again, if it doesn't make any difference, then it's okay to be fictitious.
I don't think it makes a difference, because I don't think the city has, you know, I shouldn't say this. I don't know what the city even has in reserve.
Well, this, if I recall correctly, we're not worried about actual expenditures. This talks about budgeting and how we go about creating the annual budget and the numbers that we plug in there. And I guess we're going to hear later on this evening what our city treasurer says is our return on funds. And in the couple of years I've been on the committee here, I can't recall us ever getting much over 2.5% on our invested funds. So for purposes of just being legitimate in our budgeting purposes, I think this is something that we should actually take back to the city council and have them review it and think about that number that they're using in the budget. And granted,
I think that's reasonable, by the way. I think because I don't really know whether you have money in the bank even any interest rate. But if you wanted to be a little more realistic, maybe 2% makes sense. I don't want to dwell on this too much because
right.
Again, it's really outside of, you know, I was asked to calculate a number, that's what I did.
And we appreciate what you've done. It gives us an idea.
Okay, next page. Oh, next page, please. Okay, this is, keep going, a couple more pages. One more page after this. So this is, okay, stop. So this is PDF 31. I know it's a lot of numbers, okay? But it's actually kind of interesting, and it's probably one of the last ones I'm gonna go through. Now, I'm looking at everything is here is in thousands, right? So when you see the number in the bottom on the top section, 991, that's 991,000. Now, what happens is I'm looking at successive valuations from your claims administrator. So, for example, let's look at the 16-17 year. Well, at the end of the 16-17 year, the claims administrator said that the cost of the claims are going to be 1,952. 1,952,000. Then a year later, they changed it to 1 million, I think is that 968?
Yes.
And then a year after that, they actually increased it to 2,382,000. This is from the claims administrator. Now, when you look across, it's always the same way. It's the same group of claims, the same year, what the claims administrator said changed. So if you look at 17-18, this is a bit of an extreme example. They said the year was going to cost 889, and now they think it's almost double the cost at 1917. The same claims. These are the same injured workers getting the same checks, except what happens is a year later, you now realize the person you thought that, you know, heartburn needs a heart transplant. I mean, that's an extreme example, but I'm trying to let you know what's happening here. So this is really the nut of my job. It's seeing where the claims administrator says it's going to cost, but what I know from how they do their job and how this claims develop, what the actual costs will be. Now, more than two things I want to bring to your attention. If you recall before, I said that one of the reasons why I increased my numbers was because of the 17-18 year, and now you can see why. last year when I did the work, it looked like it was a pretty good year. In fact, one of the best years you've ever had. Now it doesn't look so good. It looks good, but not as good as it did. I also said the same thing about the 15-16 year. And if you look, last year, on the 15-16 year, they started at 1475. Then it went to, 2209 and then 2358. Over the last 12 months, they increased it to 3,501,000. So that's the reason why the liability went up, because the information I got from the claims administrator told me that they really underestimated some of these claims. Now, there's always the question, if they bump up the reserves, will they bump them up in the future again? And the answer is really nobody knows, but it's more like a pattern that I'm observing. And what I do is I come up with a pattern over 20 years, and I try and make a best estimate of what I think will happen in the future.
Quick question. Do you have any idea what percentage of this is churn? Meaning, I imagine some people come, they eventually come off workers' comp, and other ones stay on for, more and more years.
Right.
And brand new ones come on each year as well. So, any idea what percentage of this is churn?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question, but you said, do you mean how many claims do you close? Go to the next page. Maybe that'll help. Okay, so these are reported claims. These are new claims that come out. Now, I suppose I could calculate it. It wasn't relevant for my work.
I guess another way to pose my question is, do we have any idea what the average amount of time that these individuals stay on workers' comp?
It could be calculated, but it's a little difficult because it wouldn't be an easy calculation. I mean, it could be calculated, but I'm not really sure. It might even be an interesting calculation, but it wasn't really.
I would imagine the longer people stay on average, the higher the rate of growth is, because you've got new coming on, and the smaller of number coming off, that's going to cause your number to go faster.
If I could add something to that, just from a employment perspective, the vast majority of our claims are public safety, police and fire. Public works being the third most frequent claim, because they're out there digging, cutting, fixing roads and digging, fixing sewers and that kind of thing. But among police and fire, the vast majority of claims, they tend to last an entire year because they're incentivized to get the 4850 because they do not have to pay tax on it. There's no income tax on 4850 benefits. So you actually make more money if you're off than you do if you come back to work. Also, people that are getting ready to retire, a lot of times, they've been here a long time and they have a claim, and then they have an incentive to retire with what's called an industrial disability retirement, because that means your pension is 50% tax-free in perpetuity. And you can also if you get 71% disability, you can end up with a stream of income they call it a life pension in the workers' comp world. It's an extra stream of income for the rest of your life. So that happens, and I think that's why the numbers sometimes will grow when you initially see it. It's like, oh, we thought it was going to be 889,000. Now it's suddenly 1.3 million, and so on and so on.
Yeah, your claims are kind of expensive. I'm not saying expensive in a way compared to someone else, but you see, you really don't have that many claims. I mean, if I think you're running 3.6 million a loss, and you're running 40, 45 claims a year, that translates into $80,000 or $90,000 per claim. Now, by the way, that is kind of interesting, because you would think that if you had good loss control, you'll bring cost per claim. It's counterintuitive, but it actually increases the average cost per claim, because usually these efforts that you do for risk management, they're really good at getting rid of the small claims. So all you're left with are the big claims. So in a way, you should say, if you go, oh man, I can't believe we're spending $90,000 a claim. We got to get better loss control. Well, in truth, you may actually have really good loss control, because otherwise you would have more claims and a lot, the big ones don't go away, but you'd have a lot more small ones.
So
go ahead.
Looking at this chart, I'm not sure I'm understanding it correctly, but if I look at the top section, the historically reported claims, the very first line, we've got 82 claims that have been outstanding for.
I didn't say that. I said reported.
Oh, reported claims. Okay.
Right. So the fact is, I don't know when, so you had 82, we're talking about the 9,000 year.
Okay.
And you have 82 claims reported for the last, no new claims.
Okay, so that's not necessarily that we're actually paying on those claims, but they are claims that are outstanding that we might have liability in the future.
That's not what they are. No, those are reported claims. And most likelihood, almost all of them are closed.
Okay.
If not all of them.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, sure. And that's, there's a lot of pages here, but that's really. And I can do the liability, but it's the exact, it looks the same, it feels the same, it's the exact same report.
Any desire, commissioners, to see the other report, or we good with just this one?
Morning, what was our $11 million negative fund balance associated with? Workers' comp or liability, or what was
Both.
that?
Combination of the two.
I'm gonna take the silence, meaning that you're either overwhelmed or exhausted. It's really not all that complicated, but it's a lot. The second time you do it, it's not that complicated. I think I must have done thousands of these in my lifetime. I used to live in Irvine, and I probably done hundreds and hundreds of these in California.
Well, not hearing anything from any of the other commissioners, I'll just formally ask, do we have any further questions or comments from the commissioners on items J1 or J2? Excuse me, J1.
I guess I have one question, and it's kind of philosophical because I'm sure you can't quantify it. But we had a question that came up over a year ago regarding the possibility of contracting our fire department to LA County Fire. And the question came up about what would that do to our workers' comp liability over the next 20 years? We asked for an actuarial report, and that was never forthcoming. Can you give us just kind of a real warm and fuzzy about what would happen to the public safety workers' comp numbers if our fire department magically moved over to county fire at, say, beginning of next fiscal year?
Well, why don't we make it so let's make it another way. Let's say you already did it. Okay. Let's say you did it, and this report was as of June 30th.
Okay.
Okay. Remember I showed you the number before, the 20,207,000?
Right.
That wouldn't move a nickel because all the injured workers already have been injured. Okay. Now, what would happen then is beginning in the 2021 fiscal year, if you go back, you'll see the number was 3,515,000.
Okay.
I don't know exactly how many firefighters you've had. I would have to do the work. I mean, it's not a difficult calculation. It takes some time, but it's not intellectually hard.
Right.
I could figure out what the costs are for your firefighters or your police.
Right.
And that number will be reduced. And over time, the liability, instead of before it was like hugging the 20 million mark, would gradually go down over time, right? Because you'd pay off some of your old claims and you wouldn't be accruing any new ones.
Right.
So let's just say, for example, that the firefighters cost $5 million. I don't know what they cost. I'm just making up that number because it's easy.
Okay.
So if this year it was 20 million, you might pay off $1 million of those next year, and you wouldn't be accruing the 5 million. So your liability would go down 4 million.
Okay.
But
all right.
A question. So the existing liability would go down, as you say, because we're outsourcing the fire department. But
right, you're on the hook.
If the group that we're outsourcing the fire department to charged it correctly, and if those kinds of activities did not change, then we'd be incurring a similar charge or an identical charge from the county, and they're billing to us rather than us paying it directly.
Correct. Yeah, you didn't ask me that question, but that's true. So, I mean, if out of the goodness of the heart, the county was willing to, to pay people for you, then, but I don't know how they would price it, right? And would the price be level? For example, they could make it one amount 1 year, and then they'd be stuck on another amount.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone. I don't think anyone.
Price it proportionally.
Yeah, I assume there would be an allocation. It would be interesting to find out what an allocation would be based on county fire with a similar number of firefighters as we have within our.
Yeah. If only we had a way to get a study showing something like that.
Well, it's not that hard.
I'm sorry I launched that one. This probably isn't the place to have that discussion, but the county fire proposal included all personnel costs and all operational costs. So workers' comp for the personnel was included in their preliminary numbers, and that's what we were looking to move on to phase 2 of the study and figure out what the real numbers were, and we didn't get there. But that's a whole different discussion. I guess the only point I was trying to get clear in my head was the internal financials that were done and presented to the city council said that our workers' comp costs were going to go up every year from now on, even without the fire department in the city. And from what I just heard, the fire department portion of that will undoubtedly go down if those people are not employees of our city.
Well, I said that the liability. Well, I didn't. Well, two things will happen. I want to be really clear. Okay. Two things will happen. One is the liability as of the date that everyone leaves.
Right.
It won't change after they leave because you're on the hook for everyone that was hurt before.
Right.
Then what will happen is you will be accruing new claims at a much lower rate.
Right.
I don't know what firefighters cost you, but you'll be getting new claims and you'll be paying off some of the liability.
Right.
So over time, the liability will go down, but it's going to go down because you're paying the claims.
Yeah, but the net is, in terms of the budget, the dollar amount for workers' comp for those firefighters that are not on our direct payroll or our exposure will go down over, say, a 20-year period. As opposed to what we were presented with that said it was going to go up at a rate of about 5% a year.
I don't know who did the work and I haven't seen it. So,
Okay.
I mean, Is it plausible? Yes. Does it sound like it's the right number? No.
Okay.
Now, if I understood Diane correctly, she said the majority of the claims are right around 1 year.
No, that's not what she said.
Okay.
That's their salary continuation. There's also the medical component, the reserves for all the medical procedures that they're going to have, and a lot of the claims actually last for
years and years.
Time. But the salary continuation of 4850 goes for a year, and then they have the opportunity to go on what's called TTD, which is temporary disability, which is 2/3 of their pay. They can supplement that with accrued leave to get a full paycheck, and they can do that for another year.
Hey, Diane, could you do me a favor? Could you go back on the page a few pages to Exhibit 1, WC1?
What page is that?
Keep going. Okay, right there, stop. Okay, so we're looking at PDF 28. Okay, so this is a summary of your loss experience. And you can see, I'm looking to 93, 94. You still have 30 open claims from 1993, 94. So these claims are pushing, 28 years old? Something like 26 years old, long time, 26. And you still have 30 open claims from 26 years ago.
So there's a percentage of claims that essentially go on for the rest of the person's life, is what it looks like.
They have a lot of future medical, and a lot of them, they retire on the younger side and then live an incredibly long time.
Mm-hmm.
Continue to treat, for whatever reason throughout the course.
So, Mr. Glixman, to Commissioner Sample's point, I think if I can speak on your behalf now, this information is first of all, you've done a fantastic job. Certainly you're good at this. There's more numbers here than I can digest. However, I think that if we were to just break it out by fire, And I don't know if there's any other breakouts that would be as valuable, but certainly to see the fire component of this, that would really help us, because one of our roles is really to look at, ways we need to look at alternative methods for budgeting and for how the city spends its money. And one of the things that we have been looking at as a city is the total cost of our fire department.
Well, that wasn't part of, I can do it. It wasn't part of the job.
Right.
I understand. If it were part of the job, say, for the next time you did this report, it is something that you could do.
I probably would recommend doing it in two parts, actually. One would cost very little, and that would be just producing this exhibit for firefighters. Because it may turn out that even though, or police, it may turn out that, you're not really happy about paying them the money, that it's not, you'd want to see the numbers before you began anything else. So it really wouldn't be very difficult to create this just one page for fire or police or for any single department.
Well,
so if you're asking me to do that, that's not difficult.
Mr. Chair, we were actually asked, this commission was asked by the city council a year ago in September to evaluate some of the workers' comp and liability costs related to the fire department move. And at that time, our city manager's office said that trying to get that kind of an actuarial report, because that's what we asked for, said it would be expensive and we couldn't afford it. And that's why it was never supplied. So we should probably take this as a different discussion, but that was our answer. And yes, that was a question over a year ago.
Well, I did both studies for a combined fee of $3,500. I'm just saying.
Well, yes, Mr. Glickman, as our chair said, I think you've done a fabulous job here. I really appreciate your input and your candor in answering some of these questions. This is an issue we have to take up with our city council and our city manager's office to figure out where we're going to move. They may not have an appetite to even try to entertain this question again. So I have no idea.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's not that difficult. And that means I guess I'm done, huh? I should always leave them wanting more.
Well, do we have any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Seeing none. Do we have any Zoom or e-comments?
No e-comments.
Okay. May I ask?
And no Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Then I would like to ask for a motion to receive and file item J1.
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
Okay. Well, thank you for letting me do it. And I'm
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Marnie.
To conclude, can we have a roll call vote, please? Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Item J1 is now received and filed. Commissioner Woodham, did you have any further comment?
Yeah, I had a question of Marnie, if I could, just on the accounting for this. I was confused last time when we talked about an $11 million negative fund balance. The way I think that occurs is this: when we start from scratch, and we put $1 million into the fund to solve this in the future, and if our expected claims are $1 million, then we've got a net fund balance of zero. If the next year, as we've had in I guess back in 2009, those liabilities jump, say from 1 million to 10 million. Is that what creates a negative fund balance? That expected loss increases to an amount that is much higher than what we have funds to carry?
It's a part of it. Basically, your negative fund balance comes when your expenditures, and that's all of them, not just these projected losses, when your expenditures exceed your revenues.
Well, explain that part, because I wasn't sure when this estimate actually becomes an expense. When you write a check for claims that you're paying that year, is that when we actually expense it?
So that's one piece as well. And then the another piece is what is projected.
But the projection part isn't an expense unless we decide to provide funds to cover it. So it looks like the $11 million negative fund balance, we've decided not to cover that. So if back to my example, if that fund balance goes from 0 to $11 million in 1 year and we don't fund any of it, that doesn't add to expense, does it?
Yeah, it does. We are required by GASB 10 to record the expense.
But back in 09, when that fund balance went from a positive 15 million to a negative 1 million, what did we expense that year?
That's what we're going to take a look at next month. We're going to take a look at some history.
Okay, well, just put me down as someone who doesn't understand the accounting for this. We need some more discussion. I need more discussion on that.
Definitely.
Me too.
All right. Moving on to item J2, being presented by our city treasurer, Steve Deals.
Hello, hopefully you can hear me. I'll turn on my video. All right, very good. Actually, Nilesh will end up taking the lead on this, but I want to welcome you to the 2020-21 Treasurer's Report. There's some very important trends that are be very important for you to look at. I would like to welcome Commissioners Conroy and Marin, whom I don't believe I've met yet. And I just want to know, has everybody here and this should be familiar to everyone.
I think you cut out there, Steve. At least you did.
Correct?
Yeah, what was your question?
Yeah, I've got this shared Wi-Fi here. Has everybody here been present for a treasurer's report?
No, this is my first time.
I have. I've been on the commission now for a year.
Yeah, so have I.
I have a forgettable face, apparently.
Okay, so we have we have some first timers here. I'm sorry, my internet. I've got a lot going on with video in my house right now, so
Commissioner Marin is new to the commission as of last month, so this will be his first report with you.
Okay.
The rest of the commission has been through a number of reports already.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. The last quarterly report I was participating in, I had no video, and I just wanted to make sure. So welcome, Commissioner Marin. It's nice to have you aboard. And I'll have Nilesh take the lead shortly. I would like to add one thing, that there have been no workman's comp claims coming from the treasurer's office. So we're not adding to that expense at all. Okay, Nilesh, why don't you take it away?
Welcome, Commissioner Marin. My name is Nilesh Mehta, Chief Deputy City Treasurer, along with Steve Deals. We'll be going over the first quarter Treasurer's Report. In the packet, you can follow us on page 126. So if you pull up page 126, or you can just view the shared screen. Hopefully everyone has the ability to view my screen that I'm sharing right now.
All right.
So within our administrative report, what's included is the treasurer's portfolio summary, investment reporting guidelines, and this is within this packet starting on page 116. Investment report by FHN Main Street, which includes the portfolio summary, investment policy compliance, investment activity report, and general economic and market update. Within this PowerPoint presentation, we're going to go over investment reporting objectives and guidelines, and this is for municipal investing, policy compliance, quarterly performance, brief overview on cash flow analysis, the fiscal impact for the quarter, month-end portfolio book yield, maturity distribution, sector allocation, historical book value, and finally, trading activity. So the key investment objectives for municipal investing are safety, liquidity, and yield. In that order, our goals are to protect the principal, provide necessary liquidity to cover ongoing and unexpected cash needs, and finally, maximizing earnings, recognizing need for safety and liquidity. Here's a continued investment reporting guidelines. Keep in mind that the money belongs to the community, so we must act in a responsible stewardship capacity. As I mentioned, the generally accepted objectives in managing public funds are safety, liquidity, and yield. And it is, as investment managers, it's our objective to earn a reasonable rate of return on the city's investments while preserving capital in the overall portfolio. It's not the goal to earn maximum returns on the portfolio, as this would expose the city to an unacceptable level of risk. So furthermore, in public investing, failures occur when policies are not clear, policies were inappropriate or not followed, or oversight is inadequate. And that is why we have these quarterly updates. Here are some questions to ask. Do you review the investment policy? Do you understand the investment program? Do you receive and review periodic investment reports? Are they clear, concise, and readable? And do you fully understand them? So that's what our goal is in the City Treasurer's office. Here's a brief overview of the policy compliance from our investment policy. As you can see on the right, we are in compliance for the quarter. And here's a brief overview, and I'll go into the weighted average maturity and later on in this presentation. Here's a performance update on the first quarter. Within our portfolio, we had just under $11 million sitting in banks, cash in banks and money market. Local agency investment funds, we call it LAIF, is just over 7 million. Federal agency issues, which is just about half of our portfolio. We don't have any funds invested in commercial paper. Corporate medium-term notes, just under 21 million. Bank CDs, just about 3 million. Treasuries, 8 million, which gives us a total investment portfolio of 73,286,432. Weighted average.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
You show 10.9 million in cash in banks and money markets. How much of that is cash and how much is in money markets? Again, I'm looking for a number of just idle cash.
So we have a general account, which is basic. We call it cash and money markets, but it's basically just cash. Bank of America is our bank account where the money is located.
No current money markets right now.
Correct.
Okay.
Good question.
So the 10.9 million, you're comfortable that much cash is required, that much is required in idle cash. I assume you've done cash management studies to back that up.
That cash can move between LAIF and the general fund. So it might go back and forth, and that's just a snapshot on the actual time of the balances we had at the end of the quarter. That's not necessarily the amount of money kept. This is just that date at the end of the quarter, how much cash was in that account.
Okay, well, how was it during the quarter? I'm looking for, the question is, do we have too much in idle cash, or is that what you have to have in order to function? So that's the basis of my question.
You'll see down the line when we have our cash flow report, that'll probably give you a better idea, but this isn't an average balance, it's an actual balance.
Yeah, understood.
But we'll show you the cash flow report, it'll probably better answer that question.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so just to summarize, the 10,855,000 is the ending balance as of January 30, or I'm sorry, at the end of the quarter, which is September 30th. And here's a comparison for the first quarter of last year. And as you can see, the lay field was 2.25%. Just a brief overview, we're currently at 0.68%. So when you look at the interest earned, 430,000 versus 502,000, which was at the end of last year.
Hey, can I interject here? Yeah, we're in a lower interest rate environment. I think that's everybody knows that. I do want to say that just for your knowledge, I stretched a network cable over to my computer, so hopefully I have a better connection than I had moments ago. But I'd like to toggle back and forth between the prior slide and this slide. What we're looking at, the total investment portfolio plus the cash in banks on this slide a year ago was about 92 million. That's the 84 plus the 8. If you look at, yeah, there's the 84 there and then plus the 8 on the top line. In the first quarter, I'm comparing first quarter. This year, we have 10 million in cash and 73 million in value of the investment portfolio. That's the theme of this report. We're down about, what, $8 or $9 million in total. So that's the thing I want to toggle back and forth about. It goes to Mr. Woodham's question about how much cash we need and do we have enough in general, that sort of thing. But overall, the city's cash and investment position is down. And you'll see some more examples of this going forward. The value of the portfolio is down not because of the lower interest rate environment. In fact, we've seen a lower interest rate environment where our portfolio grows because of the amount of revenue the city is generating. But right now, the city's revenues are down. As a result, the value of the portfolio is down, and that's the theme I wanted to point out going forward.
If I'm looking at this report correctly, I see what you're saying, how the overall portfolio is down about 10 million from a year ago, first quarter. But it looks like it's down 20 million from fourth quarter, so the prior quarter to this quarter. Am I looking at that correctly?
Yeah, that may be. If you go switch slides, and that's okay. That's kind of normal because if you look at the beginning of the year, last year, 84 million, and it rose to 94 million. At the end of the year is when we get a lot of our revenues, including mainly our property tax revenue. So that gives us a bump in value at the end of the year. So you would expect to go forward from December then through the end of from the fourth quarter back to the first quarter, we do spend down some money. And I'm sorry, I got my dates wrong because the fourth quarter is not December. But anyway, we get revenues. That's the typical revenue stream and value of the portfolio. It tends to go up in the year and then starts at a lower balance. But you are correct. We went from 94 down to that current value.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to continue, I can show you the performance from 2018. As you can see, fourth quarter, same thing happened. So this is a common trend for the city. And here's a sort of a quick analysis on our cash flow that we've been working on to show as for illustrative purposes As you can see, for July, the first month of the first quarter, we have a PERS prepayment. And for Commissioner Marin, the way that PERS prepayment works is that we prepay the PERS liability at the beginning of the fiscal year in order to save additional interest payments that would be normally due if we were to make monthly payments to PERS or a pension liability. So this is a quick synopsis for the quarter. And what I've done is I have also included a 12-month. And what we do is we utilize this to gain a better perspective on our cash flow needs. So as Steve mentioned, when you look at the month of December, you'll see an abnormal number in terms of the total credits that the city received. And part of that, as Steve mentioned, was the property taxes that comes in from the county. On a monthly basis, we receive several credits from utility users tax that utilities pay, sales tax from the county, and so forth. So there's a significant number of credits as well as debits that occur throughout the year. This is unexpected times that you guys have observed. So we're trying to utilize this kind of a cash flow analysis to get a better idea of how much we need in liquidity for upcoming needs and expenses. Fiscal impact to the city. Interest earned year to date is $430,578. From that, we contribute approximately 44%, which goes into the general fund. That comes down to just under $190,000 that we contribute. Our goal to contribute to the general fund for the fiscal year is $750,000. So we are anticipating meeting those. Of course, future trends are uncertain. So
that's our budgeted projection.
That's our budgeted projection, correct. Here's a quick snapshot of our month-end portfolio book yield. So we're maintaining just under 2.2%. So as you can see, going back to October 19, our peak November 19th was just around 2.35%. So we are holding there in terms of the returns on our portfolio.
Excuse me just a minute. Did I hear you right? You said that your budgeted anticipated investment revenue for this year is $750,000, but your run rate in the first quarter is $149,000. Is what I heard?
Our contribution to the general fund, which is approximately 44% of our interest earned for the whole year. So 44% of whatever we earn goes towards the general fund, and we project a $750,000 contribution to the general fund after the 4 quarters. We're currently at just under 200,000.
Okay.
Sorry
to do that to you, but thank you.
That's okay. Here's a brief summary on the maturity distribution. We have in our portfolio, 27.3% of our portfolio is in investments that mature within 1 year, 0 to 1 year. So, and then here's a detailed analysis on our sector allocation. As I mentioned, we have 47.2% of our portfolio in agencies, 11% in treasuries, just under 4% in CDs. LAIF is just under 10%, and corporates are 28.5%.
This is a graphic of the same information he gave you in the when we were showing you where all of our investments were.
Right.
How do you determine how to spread your maturity distribution, or even your sector allocation for that matter?
It's part of our investment policy. So if you go back, you want to go back to the investment policy slide, Nilesh?
Yes. I recall. Yeah, it says basically that. Yeah.
Yes.
Parameters. And
yeah.
You'll tweak them.
Right.
Let me ask this then, maybe. Where do those parameters come from, and do they ever change?
Yes. So we do change them on occasion. Sometimes there are new investment opportunities, and we've added some in recent years. We review the investment policy annually. We review it with the Budget and Finance Commission annually, and we review it with the City Council annually for final approval. So we have our investment advisors, FHN, and they work with, just like your previous guest speaker, you know, he works with a lot of different clients. They work with a lot of different clients, and they're always looking at best practices on opportunities. There's also CDIAC, and that's the California sort of overseer that provides guidance on what is allowable for our investments and then for municipal investments. And then also we're governed by state law. So there's not a whole lot of room for us to, you know, we can't do anything crazy, and we certainly never invest in equities. We're just not allowed to, for example.
Sure.
But as things become available, you know, we'll add it to our policy. That doesn't mean we'll necessarily invest in that sort of thing, but it becomes an opportunity for investment. So, for example, we don't have anything in money markets right now from the prior discussion.
And would you say that typically starts with FHN making a recommendation to your office?
It starts with FHN making the recommendation. We review it, and then we make the recommended changes in conjunction with them to the portfolio, and then the policy, the investment policy, and then we send that to the city attorney's office for review, and they do a pretty thorough review. It's pretty interesting. We did have, like, just to give you an example, we tried to add a pool. We thought it was a good idea, and we went through the process of getting it approved by the city council. They approved it, and then when we came to bring the policy back in a subsequent year, when the city attorney reviewed it, they noticed some language that made them uncomfortable, and we actually pulled that one from the policy. So we can add things, and we do remove things from year to year.
Steve, follow-up question to that. I was wondering, when you were talking about returns and now investment policy, what sort of checking do you do with other cities to look at their investment policy and their returns? My guess is that that all of you have to invest in pretty much the same way, so that there is not an opportunity for one city to have much higher or much lower returns. On the other hand, I would think there would be an association of city and county treasurers so that you can compare this data and see if there are any outliers. How is that handled? How would you respond to that?
So that is what we do. We belong to national and state associations. We were attending conferences. You know, we haven't in the COVID environment. We do meet and press the flesh and talk about things. We do compare to neighboring cities. But despite the fact that we all have the same municipal investment governance, our policies do have some opportunities to be different. And then it also depends on the nature of the income for the city. So Redondo Beach is very different than Torrance if we're comparing to neighboring cities. And so their cash flows are different. And so despite the fact that maybe there's not too much wiggle room in the policies, it depends on the amount of money coming in and going out and how much time they have to invest and that sort of thing that can change their actual returns. So there can be some variability in returns, and also there's some variability in how returns get reported. So some people report on book yield and some people report on total return, and so it depends. So there's a little more to it than just looking at somebody's number. You really need to look at what their income is like, what their cash flow is like. And then you want to remember, again, I always remind you this, and this will be good for Commissioner Marin. As Nilesh said early on, it's safety, liquidity, yield. And the most important thing is is safety, but we have to match the city's liquidity requirements. So yield comes third, and yet despite that, every time we bring up this discussion, people go straight to yield, talk about yield. And yield is third. We have to make sure we're matching the cash flow requirements of the city before yield. And if you recall what happened in Orange County, their yield was higher until it wasn't, and then they couldn't match the county's cash flow, and then suddenly they were in big trouble. So it's safety, liquidity, yield, even though whenever we talk about this stuff, people always just laser beam right on yield. And I just want to remind you that we have the other two priorities first.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Here's a quick graphical representation of the historical book value. And this goes back to September 2009. As you can see, at the beginning of each quarter, going back that far, our portfolio does drop. So it is a common trend, but you will notice that this year in particular, the usual upswing that we've been observing has not quite happened. So this
right. So let me. So if you guys draw a line from, a trend line through here, you see how our portfolio value has been increasing over the years. And in some of these years, there have been a decreasing interest rate environment. Nevertheless, the trend has always been, because the city's revenue stream was growing, that the value of the portfolio increased. And now, and this is what I was talking about early on, this is the theme, you can see that the current book value is the lowest it's been since 2014. If you just scan your eyes to the left. So this is a very important slide to look at, as there'll be another example going forward in the next slide or two.
And here's just a, This just breaks it down by month of exactly what Steve mentioned. So if you look at September 2020, 75.4, you'll see going back to 2015, that's what it shows.
And then, so next slide.
And the final slide is on the trading activity for the quarter. This is interesting because you will see that our purchases for the last 7 months since the COVID started has been zero. So
zero. So we haven't had the extra funds to buy a single new security. And that's part of the reason why that's another example of what happens when you're spending down, or you're spending what you can when your revenues are dropping. So so Commissioner Marin, the white bars are purchases, and we haven't seen any since February. And that's very unusual. I mean, all these goose eggs, look from March, April, May, June, July, August, September. So, it's interesting. We give you these quarterly reports, and we do what we can with the investment, keeping the money safe, keeping an eye on revenues and expenses, watching cash flow and all that. But going back to that discussion about the rate of return that everybody has this laser focus on, it's such a small part of what the city's actual revenues are, and our revenues have been falling. And I know that the city council's really been struggling with a policy for economic development, and it's really been a big political battle, but we're seeing the effects of having, I'll just say it, an incoherent economic development program with the city. So hopefully, some issues will get resolved and we can start moving forward. So when we had a record economy, the city still had tight cash flows. So now that we've got a downturn, it's we've had to have layoffs and other things. But this is what you see with declining revenues. in the city, and it shows up in the portfolio.
So, Steve, to your point, we've got a portfolio that's where it was back in 2014, and at the same time, we've got yields, although we're not laser focused on that, yields that are lower than they were even in 2014, and certainly our expenses as a city are higher than they were in 2016. Yes. So I just want kind of your gut. How do we bridge this gap? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is something I was projecting before, and you will recall it. And again, so people would talk about yields, but there's two multipliers. There's the rate of return, but there's the body of the value of the portfolio. And so even if our rate of return goes up, if interest rates go up, but we have a very small portfolio to invest, we're still getting, numerically small returns. So this is the thing I've been trying. Well, I've mentioned over the years, the last year. I mean, you could sort of see this coming. I didn't know there'd be COVID. I didn't know it'd be like this, but what was always certain that even during a good economy is there will be a bad one will follow because the business cycles occur. And so, just want to say we need to plan ahead. We need to get things going. But in good times, sometimes they don't think about the bad times that can come. But there's two aspects to that multiplier, which is the size of the portfolio as well as the rate of return. And the city needs to improve its revenue position, period. And we're not the only city. I'm not pointing the finger just at Redondo. I mean, compared to other cities, we're actually not as bad, frankly. But we don't have to be this bad if we were doing some things better, I think, in advance. There are some bright spots on the horizon, though. We did get a report on our property tax picture, which looks pretty good, actually. So that's a good thing. So we're not down everywhere, but this is what it looks like when we are down. And but we're down now, and eventually things should pick up because again, there's business cycles, so we'll be up again. But it's hard to get through these times, and it just sometimes I think it just didn't have to be this bad, but it is what it is. We're in it.
If our overall balance, say, continues to decline, then does our general fund contribution rate increase in order to hit that 750 number like we have now, or do we just end up contributing less funds to the general fund in order to maintain our overall investment balance?
So we're not trying to maintain an overall investment balance. What we're trying to do is provide Marnie with a number that she can count on for budgeting purposes. So we look forward, we look at the size of the portfolio, we do our best to, prognosticate, the next 12 months, and then we try to give her a number that she can count on receiving. A year or so, we were highly criticized for actually having much better returns than we had projected. And that was a budgeting criticism because they couldn't plan on spending it. And I kept arguing it was really a good news item. This, on the other hand, I don't think we're going to be overshooting by much this year. And I think we should hit that number of 750. But if we don't, then Marnie's got to scramble and actually, Marnie's does the accounting. She doesn't do the spending. So I apologize for that. It's not just Marnie. It's the city manager's office. It's got to make some tough decisions about what to do. So it's our job. It's, as again, safety, liquidity, yield, and we try to make sure that we can give them a reliable, budgetable number that we don't undershoot, ideally. So
that 750 might be a lower number in a future year.
Oh yeah. If Yeah, absolutely. If interest rates stay low and if they're below at the end of this fiscal year or approaching the end of the fiscal year when we start to do the budgeting, and it looks like our portfolio is low, we're going to guess what our average portfolio is and what the average rate of return is and come up with a number, and it'll probably be lower than 750.
Yeah, that helps.
So, Steve, I think I have two questions. First of all, the interest rate environment and the yield and things, it's so skinny now, it doesn't make any sense to even discuss that part. But I'm sure that this year going into the budget cycle, you were asked, or your department was asked to put together some projections of what you expected to be the revenue and the expenditures for the current fiscal year that we're in. Just as a broad brush number, where we are today, are we more or less tracking in those two areas, or is one better or worse than where you expected? And can you comment on that?
Well, we don't do the revenue projections per se. Marnie's office primarily does that, and we make some contribution, but because of this tight environment we're in, the Marnie's office has put together their own quarterly reports, and they're giving those to the city council about actual revenues. We're giving you the quarterly report based on the portfolio performance. Okay. But this is new this year that, because of the nature of things right now, that the finance department is giving quarterly reports. And is that on today's agenda, Marnie? Or
It sure is.
Yeah, oh. So you're going to get that answer in detail today.
Okay, so that's on the operating revenue and expense side. In terms of our portfolio itself, are we tracking where you expected?
Well, that's the point. Yes. So you take the 750, divide it by 4,
right?
And it should be a number around what we're bringing in, and we brought in 180 so far. So we're tracking okay, but it's only one quarter.
Right.
So we don't really know. It's been an absolutely bizarre, crazy year. For me in business, in personal finance, and the city's finance, and everything else, we just don't know.
Okay. The other question I have for you, and I appreciate that, has there been any discussion about looking into pension obligation bonds to deal with our pension obligations? Because that's a huge chunk of what happens in our budget every year. And in this low interest rate environment, I hear a lot of cities.
Okay. All right. Hold on. That's a policy question. And I could give you my personal opinion, but what you're asking for is to borrow money, right, to pay for pensions.
Right.
So that's what a pension obligation bond is.
Right.
Would you do that? That's the question I put out there. When I borrow money, it's for a capital expenditure. Okay. I don't put a lot of money on my credit card bill. So, okay. If you're borrowing money for pension obligations, I don't know how you're projecting you're going to pay that back. So, I have not heard a lot of discussion. I know it comes up and people ask the question like you're asking, mm-hmm. but in the halls, I have not heard much about that. And to the prior question about do we meet with other cities and you look at best practices and things, I'm not hearing that from others currently.
Apparently, there are some surrounding cities that are already entertaining that. And to answer your question, would I borrow money to buy a house? I think we've all done that. And that's the concept behind a pension obligation fund that goes to pay for unfunded liabilities that are already expended. So I appreciate your comments on it, but that's why I asked the question.
No, the example is if you borrow money to buy a house, you get a house. So the house goes up in value, you pay it off, you have something. That's a pension obligation that you're borrowing money to pay an expense. And that's
the cities that are looking into this are considering the fact that CalPERS is basically charging about a 5% interest rate on the unfunded liabilities. that we are taking this $13 million a year out of our budget to pay. And if we borrowed the money at 2% instead of 5%, and paid that same $13 million, net, we're saving money. And I wondered if anyone had asked you to explore it. This is probably not a place to debate that.
Yeah, no. But it's, no, we haven't. And I haven't, it hasn't come across the transom, no.
Okay, thank you. Motion to receive and file.
Was that the end of the presentation?
Yes, it was.
All right. Okay. Any other questions from commissioners?
I've got one quick question to Steve. Steve, I'm interested in the process of changing investment policy. You mentioned that it comes from FHN to you. You package it, send it to the city council. Has budget and finance ever been involved in discussing investment policy changes? And would you welcome input from the Budget and Finance Commission on those things? I think that.
Yes, we annually bring it before the Budget and Finance Commission, and you simply may not recall, but you were part of that discussion the last time.
I didn't remember us making. Okay,
yeah.
That answers the question then.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
If you go back, actually, can you go back to the very beginning, just on that point, Nilesh? Okay, so investment reporting guidelines. Okay, next slide. Okay, so questions to ask, and you just did. Do you review the investment policy? So the answer is yes, and you do review it, and that's why we give you these questions. These are good questions to ask, and you just did. And the fact is, we do present you the investment policy.
Okay, good.
And then the thing is, I mean, I know you have a very strong investment background, and it's slightly different than from municipal investing, and so now you're learning this as another part of your career in finance. But not everybody understands the city's investment program. And when I was new to the city council, it was pretty foreign to me. So the fact is, we just asked, do you understand it? And then we come down here to this next question. If you don't fully understand it, it may not be because you've got a problem understanding. It may be because we have a problem presenting, and it shouldn't be that complicated. And if it's not being presented well, it's something we can get some feedback on to improve our presentation. But this next line is the job of your staff to make these reports readable and understandable. So all questions are good, and we welcome that. And if we can't answer a question, we may not be able to either at any given time, but we can always get back to you with the answer. And then this final line, if the city's portfolio is that complex, perhaps it shouldn't be. So, okay.
Okay. Do we have any Zoom or e-comments?
No e-comments.
All right. No Zoom, I assume. Okay, then we will. Can I get a motion to receive and file, please?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Seeing a motion and second, we will do a roll call vote to receive and file. Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
And Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
And Chair votes aye as well. Item J2 is now received and filed. I'd like to thank Stephen Dills and Nilesh Mehta for their help and with this presentation and answering our questions.
Okay, thank you. And nice job managing the meeting. Mr. Conroy. That's
My-
very good.
My first one.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know. So I'm giving you props. So good job. I mean, I mean it. You know, it's a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
I should refer you as Chairman Conroy, and I would like to give the background award to Min. He has the most creative background.
He always does. All right. Thank you, guys.
All right, and welcome, Damien. Nice to have you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for the time.
Sure.
All right. Then, moving on. Our next item for discussion prior to action is J3, discussion and possible action regarding input on recommended assignments of general fund balance for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020, presented by Marty Rulin, and we have a blue folder item for that as well. Go ahead, Marty.
Thank you. So we bring to you how I summarize the year is all of a sudden good is not as bad as we thought it was going to be. So back in March, we did our mid-year report, and that was right before the pandemic hit. And so those numbers were rather optimistic. We were estimating about $1.5 million surplus at the end of fiscal year 1920. And then in April, we did an update for the City Council, making some estimates based on the impacts of COVID. At that time, since we were just at the beginning of it, and I can't say it's become a whole lot more certain, we were estimating that we could be anywhere from a $1 million deficit up to $2 million deficit. But where we're ending up for the general fund at the end of 1920, and these are approximate numbers. Our fieldwork audit is complete. But we don't say it's finalized until we've got our financial statements in hand. Just as it's reviewed by everybody, they could find something that hasn't been recorded or something like that. So we make an estimate here at our fund balance for the general fund being $10,750,000. And from that, there are non-spendable items we're required to take from that. Those are obligations we have. GASB 54 determines what goes in each category. Non-spendable is our prepaid costs and our notes and loans. Our loans are just computer loans that we make to employees. If they want to borrow from the city to make a purchase of a personal computer, they can do that. So that's about 100,000. Last year, we also had a non-spendable item for an advance. That advance was the general fund loaning to the Public Financing Authority funds where they use those funds to purchase the Kincaid's restaurant building. The city owns the building. And that was paid off during fiscal year 1920. And therefore, we don't have to take that from fund balance as a non-spendable item. Our committed items, that's our 8.33% reserve. We do that based on the coming year's adopted budget. So with all the cuts we made to the 2021 adopted budget, that amount has gone down a bit. Then we have assigned items, and here's where you can provide input. These aren't policy or GASB directed, so you have some input here. One is for encumbrances, which is our outstanding purchase orders as of June 30. You do have a list of those in your agenda item for the general fund. The list that will go to council will expand that to all funds, but you're taking a look at general fund tonight. Some of those purchase orders, it being November now, no doubt are closed, but at June 30, they were still open, and we had a commitment to make those payments. Petty cash, actually, this year at June 30, we're down a little bit because we usually have a cash drawer at Seaside Lagoon that wasn't open this summer, so we have a little less there. Compensated absences, those we make a calculation based on the vacation primarily, some other leave times that if an employee left today, we would pay them off for. It does not include sick time if an employee leaves employment here. Whatever sick time they have on the books just remains with the city. The city isn't responsible for paying that off. We take a look at that and what's a current portion of that based on payouts in the recent past, and estimate that 30% of that. So we are required to record compensated absences. A number of years ago, we would record 100% of what that calculation came to. We are recording 30%. The auditors are comfortable with that. We were able to demonstrate that we don't pay out more than that. And of course, not everybody is going to leave tomorrow. So we are at the 30% level. And then carryover assignments, you have a schedule of general fund departmental carryover requests. So those for the year, knowing that our fund balance was quite small, direction was given to the departments. Really only if you have a contract that cannot be met in any other way and it was planned to use a carryover, that could be budgeted for into 2021. So we just have a maintenance contract for our police department software, storefront improvement program. That's not leaving the program open or anything. It is simply to finish up what's already in progress. We have a consulting contract with Cosmont and Associates, and the general fund portion is for our EIFD, Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, and so some money is needed to be carried forward for to continue that contract. And then our tree trimming contract, they were given a lump sum maybe 18, 19. This is the portion that remains and needs to be carried forward so that we can meet our obligation during 2021. So that's it as far as the requested carryovers. The other portion that makes up that number is for donations that have been given to the city for a specific purpose. And so we need to carry those forward and ensure that they are spent for the purpose that they were donated for. And so with that, we end up with a unassigned fund balance of about 500,000. Staff's recommendation for that 500,000 is to leave it unassigned and take a look at mid-year on how we're doing for 2021, whether that might be needed to finish 2021 with a surplus, not a deficit, but we feel that it really would be best left unassigned. One thing missing from this chart that has been in previous years are transfers. One transfer we typically do is to the CalPERS Reserve Fund. For the last number of years, that transfer has just been a replenishment of what has been basically borrowed from the fund to balance the budget. And that was not done for fiscal year 2021, and everything prior to that has been paid back already. The reason it wasn't done for 2021 is we actually thought we were going to need it for the end of 1920, but again, the year wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. The other transfer that is not occurring here is a transfer to the Capital Projects Fund. When that transfer is done, then that is typically programmed the next fiscal year. So if we did transfer something at year end here, it would be programmed for the 21-22 budget. Not all of it. The normal transfer is $1 million. Sometimes we're able to do a little bit more than that, but typically it's $1 million. Some of that will be available for the general projects, those that can't use specialized funding. The Capital Projects Fund will be receiving a payment from the Financing Authority for a few years, just as we did for the 2021 budget. The Financing Authority, after a particular bond issue was paid off, still has available to pay this amount. And one of the eligible uses is capital projects. So it'll have some funding, but not the million from the general fund. So kind of how we got here, we did a whole general fund financial report for you. But basically, and it's comparing to, again, this adjusted budget, which is our mid-year budget that was pre-COVID. But revenues came in about $4 million less than our mid-year budget had projected. But our expenditures were also down about that much. Our libraries are closed, so we're not having to pay part-time staff to operate the library. Our recreation programs only recently have picked up on a limited basis, but towards the beginning of the pandemic, there were no recreational programs, so we were able to not pay part-time staff again for doing those recreational programs, and just things like that we have not had to incur. Of course, there's no travel going on. That saves some money too. Just all those kinds of things that the pandemic actually reduced our expenditures.
Marnie?
It's a good portion of how we got there. And we already talked about the other pieces as we went through the schedule. But again, the $510,000 that we're estimating for the unassigned fund balance, that is what we're looking for your recommendation. I'll be finalizing the report to the City Council tomorrow. That will go on their next Tuesday's agenda, and I will include in that report your recommendation for this unassigned fund balance. So I'll turn it back to you to make a recommendation.
Regarding a recommendation for the $510,000, I don't have anything off the top of my head. I'll defer to some of the commissioners that have been on this commission for a while longer, maybe have some ideas or how we've handled this in the past.
I feel like when we were in this place last year, and now that we had the same issue last year, and we opted to save the money for a rainy day, and especially with COVID and there's a possible second wave coming in, and who knows, governor's talking about another shutdown. I say save it for a rainy day.
Yeah, this is one of those years where that number is so small and there's so little flexibility. In the past, we've just recommended leaving it in the general fund and taking the staff recommendation on that, because it's not like that amount of money we can use it to move the needle somewhere else. So we may as well be a little protective. But Marnie, not trying to put you on the spot. I'm trying to understand some of these numbers, and I guess my earlier question, I now have to maybe I can rephrase it. When budgets were being prepared for this fiscal year, there was an estimate for the annualized budget of what we projected revenues were going to decrease, or revenues were going to decrease and expenses were going to increase. Was that broken down on a quarterly basis? Because I recognize that our revenues and our expenses happen at different times during the year. And that's what I was trying to ask earlier. Are we on track for this quarter or not? And if you can comment on that, and also where we are on the numbers that you've presented to us. It's like revenues are at 9% of budget. Are we at risk, or did you think that's where we were going to be at? That's what I'm trying to just get kind of a feeling for.
So these are kind of in the next item with our budget update.
Okay. Did I miss that someplace?
But generally, yes, we're feeling okay about it. I'll go through some specifics with you.
You know what? I didn't look at that one. I'm sorry. So
yeah,
okay,
even as the city treasurer was talking, revenues are so affected by timing.
Right.
So even with the investment earnings, the investment earnings at the beginning of the year were really receivables as of 1920 and don't get recorded as revenue in 2021. And that is very true with a lot of these revenue sources.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I was jumping ahead on that one. If we want to go back and just stick to what do we do with the $500,000, I think it's the right thing to do, and I don't have any other discussion on that.
Yeah.
Hey, Marty, I had a quick question on the property tax of 28. The sale of AES, I think I saw noting it. This 28 does not include the possible tax revenue from the sale of the AES site, correct?
So the sale itself, we get property transfer tax on that, and we have received that. We did receive it in fiscal year 1920. The increased valuation of the property itself that we get the property tax on, that probably will not, we won't see that increase until I think our property tax consultant said 22, 23, just because it's such a large property. My understanding is there's a whole lot of parcels making up the property, and just things that make it very complex for the assessors. So on top of the revenue we receive, for example, 1920 was based on property values in calendar year 2018. So a reassessment of that property, say in 20 or 21, we haven't realized that yet.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Is there any other comments or questions regarding what Marnie's covered so far on this?
The
And
gallery is still shut down, right? The gallery's totally closed. There's no sales tax coming from that place, right?
Oh, I am not sure if it's partially open or not, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, same here. I don't know.
I think
nobody's
I've seen
been there in a long
Kohl's.
time.
I think Kohl's is open. Like there's one or two of the big box stores that are open, but I think the interior is shut down.
Okay. Marnie, did you have any other discussion on this item? We jumped in with some questions, but there's a few more pages on your report.
So really it just, breaks down all the numbers for you, and
On Exhibit C, those are all outstanding payables for contracts signed in 1920 that we expect to pay in 2021. Is that correct?
right.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other questions or comments for this item, I will ask if we have any Zoom or e-comments.
No e-comments.
And no Zoom.
All right. Then I'll ask for a motion to receive and file.
Motion to receive? And nope.
All right. With the motion and a second, we'll do a roll call vote. All right. We'll do a roll call vote. Let's start with Commissioner Marin,
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
and Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
Okay, chair votes aye as well. Item J3 is now received and filed. Moving on to our next item, J4, discussion and possible action regarding fiscal year 2021 first quarter budget update. Marnie Ruin presenting, and we have a blue folder item for that as well.
And thank you. So as Commissioner Samples was pointing out, it is really early in the year to know how we're doing. But in a year like this where nothing seems to be normal, we will be looking at it more often and gathering what information we can. And as he said, general fund revenues, we are only at 6.9% of the annual budget. But no, that's not alarming. In fact, it's in line with fiscal year 1920 before COVID hit. So, we're looking fine that way so far. And then expenditures are much less influenced by timing. And they, just as a generalization, occur more regularly throughout the fiscal year. A couple things to point out is property tax. And again, we can't see this from what we've received so far, but our information is coming from our property tax consultant, HDL. And we've included in your agenda item a couple reports from what they gave us just this week. And it is possible, again, with the delay of 2021 property tax being based on 2019 property values. It looks like we may be able to, at mid-year, increase our revenue estimate for property tax by up to $500,000. But we'll keep an eye on it. At this point, no property taxes are due, so we really don't know what the delinquency rate is going to be for people not paying their property taxes. Our consultant told us that they had looked into it, and one of the promising factors there is that I guess 79% of property taxes paid are paid through impound accounts. And so we can probably count on those not being delinquent. In addition, the delinquency rate for 1920 was at only 0.8%. So there's a possibility that could come in better, but not till property taxes are due are we really gonna know if.
And that's assuming people are all paying their mortgages. I wonder if foreclosure rates have started to increase. It might be too early for that.
Right. Sales tax, we also recently had an update on that and provided you with with a report that we received from our sales tax consultant, also HDL. They have two sides of the business, and we use both. The sales tax estimates that they're projecting for us now indicate that we may be able at mid-year to update those estimates by up to 100,000. The online sales have really skyrocketed. And although, we would love to get a bigger portion of those, we do get a portion, and it is helping out our revenue. The other is food and drug. They've been open the whole time and sold out of all kinds of stuff. And so their sales are up from prior years also.
Marnie, have we seen an increase over the last quarter on the food and beverage the restaurants and so forth with all of the outside dining that's been opened up? Because there was a number of months where that wasn't even available.
So that quarter has not been paid to the state yet.
Okay.
So we'll wait and see on that one.
I know I'm going to eat more than I was, 3-4 months ago. So
Sure.
Okay.
Marnie, you mentioned our sales tax take on online purchases. Did you say that is less than actual in-store purchases?
So yes, the in-store purchases, we get 1% of the tax collected. For the online sales, they go into a pool, a county pool, and that pool is distributed based on the brick and mortar
Okay.
sales. So yeah, we get a smaller piece of that. So the one possible downturn in our revenue is TOT, or transient occupancy tax. That one we are trending okay on for now, but we had projected that as the fiscal year goes on to see some increases there, and not sure, how long travel restrictions are going to be prolonged, and how long large gatherings, because a lot of our hotels not only are used for overnight stays and whatnot from travel, but they also host large events like weddings or whatnot, and as those are not sure whether the revenue, is going to pick up this fiscal year or not. So we will continue to watch that, but it possibly will have to revise that number down. Property tax in lieu of VLF, which is vehicle license fees, kind of a swap the state did some time ago. We actually don't receive any revenue on that source by this time of year, but based on the property values, our property tax consultant is recommending that we can increase that revenue estimate by about $200,000. And then the last is that I want to point out is the property transfer tax. So that has not been behaving as usual. Usually the summer months are the heaviest, and then it falls off come fall. This year, since we weren't very far into all of the closures and restrictions, summer was really quite slow as we had predicted. But this fall looks like it's picking up, both in the number of properties sold and also the value of those sales. So again, we'll keep an eye on it and see whether that trend continues, or if it, our summer couple months just move to a couple months in fall, and then it's going to fall back off. So we'll wait and see. Then on the expenditure side, we are trending to budget pretty well. We're at about 30% of budget. We would expect 25, but we did make the prepayment of our unfunded liability to PERS. So first quarter is going to be a little bit higher. In our general fund financial report, that's for the first quarter of the year, we took a look at all the expenditures, and they really are trending to budget, but they are lower than the prior fiscal year, which, you know, the budget is lower because we made all sorts of reductions to the expenditure side. So looks like we're looking pretty good, but again, it's awfully early in the year to be saying how we're going to end up. But maybe not as bad as we projected, but yet we had over a $5 million structural deficit when we adopted the budget. So we certainly aren't going to overcome that, but we might not be as high as that. So I can take any questions you have, but that's kind of where we stand as of the first quarter.
I guess Marnie from you.
Go ahead, Mel.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a quick question about Performing Arts Center. That's still closed, so we're not getting any revenue, right?
Exactly. You're right. Right.
How much longer is that going to stay closed? Do we know?
No, we
Definitely? All right.
Well, that's kind of a money sink anyway, isn't it? We always run it at a deficit.
That's one of those things, kind of like Seaside Lagoon, though, where we have, our part-time staff who comes in just while it's open, that we're saving some money. But, we're still maintaining the facility. We still have people overseeing the operations. Those kind of costs don't go away, and yet we're bringing in zero revenue. So.
Yeah.
I see parking citation revenues for the first quarter of 2021 only slightly below those for 1920. And I know there was an amnesty period where people weren't getting any parking tickets at all. Is that going to be reflected in the next quarter's report more? Or how would you explain the fact that these seem consistent between the 2 years?
My hope, since I haven't gotten a parking ticket, is that it will then increase beyond this during the second quarter.
But I would have expected maybe this quarter to have been much, much lower. I'm not pro parking ticket, obviously, but I just know because I know, my daughter parks out in front and she's not worried about moving her car to the other side of the street. She hasn't been, but I know they're giving out tickets now. So yep. I'm just wondering, I would expect that number to be maybe half of what it was from the prior year, but I'm not seeing it.
And although street sweeping is our largest portion of parking citations, it's not the only. So.
Okay.
Marnie, you mentioned the Galleria a moment ago. What's the status of that construction project to rehab or redo the Galleria?
I don't know. So that tells me it's still a ways off.
Okay.
I think the last time we heard something about it, they still had not put together formal plans to present to the Planning Commission and the City Council. So demolition, construction, all of that stuff sounds like it's at least a few years off. That's just kind of from memory.
Okay.
All right.
So Marnie, if I heard you correctly, it's early on in the fiscal year to be able to 1 point on a map isn't a trend. So it's kind of early to establish a trend of whether we think we're going in the right direction or things may go askew next quarter. But we're kind of doing okay with respect to both revenues and expenses.
Right. Same as 19 1920.
Okay.
Not
Yeah,
good,
I don't think we can compare this.
but not as bad as we were thinking.
Okay, the only one comment I have regarding the revenue side was, and HCL isn't here to comment, so I'm not sure if this is a valid thought or not, but in their assessment on property tax, they talk about we may consider a mid-year adjustment to increase the revenue by up to $500,000. But in the other documentation that they provided over under real estate trends, they did a much more detailed description of how sales are down countywide, revenues are down countywide, and I in my head, I can't reconcile the idea of estimating an increase when the trend in their documentation appears to be down.
Yes, so this is based solely on the property values that hit the county rolls.
Right.
So,
but in their backup documentation, they talk about a number of properties in Redondo Beach, a number of major properties that had substantial property tax declines that were allocated just in this last fiscal year. I'm not sure how all those dollars net out, but it sounds like $500,000 increase in revenue sounds big, and it's just thought.
and we're not booking it yet.
Okay, yeah, that's one where I would bury that one and not book it, and if we end up with an extra $500,000 at the end of the year, we can figure out where we want to allocate it to.
Exactly.
All right, that's all I've got.
I would just add that though, from a percentage of budget standpoint, we're not too far off with the first quarter of 1920, but looking at real dollars, it's, almost 30% lower revenues. So, and as Marty pointed out, the majority of that coming from the almost no TOT. So we're far from being out of the woods yet. The budget was much lower because at that point we already knew that things were looking worse. But I guess I'm just telling you guys what you probably already know. We're in a bad situation. I think the 6.9% of budget compared to the 6.3% of budget from the prior year just says that our ability to budget is consistent with where it was last year, but the dollars are still not coming in. So I just wanted
to, that budget is a lot lower. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make that point. We're not doing consistent with where we were last year.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, gentlemen? Okay. Seeing nothing, I will ask if there are any Zoom or e-comments.
No e-comments.
And no Zoom.
All right. Then I'll ask for a motion to receive and file item J4.
So moved.
Second. Seeing a move in second, we will do a roll call vote. Commissioner Merritt.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
And Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
Okay, chair votes aye as well. Item J4 is now received and filed. Our next item is item J5, discussion and possible actions regarding the implementation of internal control measures being presented by Marnie Rulon.
And again, so as you may recall, Moss Adams has been our internal auditors, and they put forth some recommendations. However, their services are not budgeted for fiscal year 2021. But we've committed to see what we could do just on our own to implement some of the recommendations that they had made previously. So we then also have committed to you as a commission to update you on where we stand in getting those implemented each quarter. So we have the same list that we presented last quarter. We did add one item because it just happened to be available for us to implement. And so we were able to add an item that we have completed. There was a recommendation that our purchasing analyst be required to submit annual economic interest disclosure forms. So this year when city clerk took to council the positions that would need to fill out or complete those forms, we added the purchasing analyst. So we can check that off that we one of their recommendations. Some of the other changes since your last update is we pushed back the date on the ordinance creating the Financial Services Department. The reviews are not going quickly. And so we've pushed that back and given those reviewing more of a chance to look at it and provide input. The cash handling training, we've made some progress on that in that last quarter we told you about another city's training video that we were able to get a hold of. And so we have actually written a script that customizes their same training video for Redondo Beach. So again, once City Hall is open and we can do some videoing, we'll be proceeding with that one. Let's see, number 3, policies and procedures that Moss Adams had provided drafts to us. We are working diligently on providing suggested edits back to them because we, since that didn't get completed before the end of the fiscal year, that actually is one of the purchase orders in your previous item that was open on June 30. And so we still have those funds available. So we are working very diligently on the CalCard policy and about ready to begin dialogue with them about the changes we think we need in their recommendations. The Internal Service Fund will follow. That's not quite as clear cut for us. They've made some recommendations that you should, check it with this or that. And the information they're suggesting we use just isn't available to us. So we will have to work with them to come up with some alternatives. They may have recommended Plan A, but if that's not available to us, we're going to have to go with Plan B. So that will take a bit longer, and so we've pushed that out to the end of the year. And then everything else follows. It will be providing training on the policies once the policies are complete. So we we have pushed those out in conjunction with the others. So with that, I can answer any questions you might have, but just wanted to keep you abreast of how we're progressing.
I had a question on this chart you were just going through. It says finding corrected yes, no, partial, and they're all marked as yes. So what does that yes indicate? Because right next to it says expected completion date, and I think all but one of them are in the future.
So there might be a time that the task where we are undertaking may not completely fulfill Moss Adams' recommendation. So that would be a partial. These are, once we get these tasks done, we will have fully implemented their recommendation.
Does that indicate then that you expect to be able to completely implement the recommendation?
Right.
Okay. And then the expected completion dates listed here. I know you mentioned some things were, following other things and so forth, but are these basically the dates that still meet your target date, or have some of these been pushed out?
Some have been pushed out.
Okay. But would you say you expect to have them all completed by the end of 2021?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, as we progress through the year, that is definitely our target. We think it's a realistic target, but other things may interfere, and we may have to go beyond.
Okay, that's all I have.
Marnie, can you give us any kind of an idea of what the disconnects are in the P-card compliance?
So they really, you mean the edits we're suggesting?
Yeah, what they're recommending and the edits you're suggesting.
So it's kind of a who's doing what.
Okay.
And, limits, I think their draft doesn't have the variables in the limits and just things like that. No major differences. Like I said, our major differences are coming in the internal service fund policy. So those are going to be a little more difficult to work through than the CalCard one.
Okay. Yeah, I was just kind of wondering. I've seen some of these recommendation reports before, and the consultants can get you so deep in the weeds that you can't comply with the policy that you write. So I was just wondering. Okay. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Marty, thanks. Thanks for putting this together. Just had a quick question, number 8, the analysts and the disclosure requirement. I think it's good. How often does this analyst need to fill out the purchase requirement? Is it annually?
Annually, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're due in April, something like that.
All right. I don't see anything else from our commissioners. Marnie, I want to thank you for putting together this report as well as all of the other reports you put together for tonight's meeting. You were very busy this prior month in addition to all your other tasks, so I appreciate it very much. At this point, I want to ask if there are any Zoom or e-comments.
No e-comments.
And no Zoom.
Wonderful. Then I will ask for a motion to receive and file the same.
Motion to receive and file.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, we will do a roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
And Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Item J5 is now received and filed. Okay. The next item on the agenda, J6, is the subcommittee's report. I will tell you that because of the presentations this evening and the wealth of information we would be gathering, that there will not be a specific subcommittee report tonight. With that, though, I will give Commissioner Woodham an opportunity to speak if there's anything he wants to for business as relates to the subcommittee.
No, nothing. We discussed this briefly, and because of the CalPERS rep, I guess is coming next meeting, right, Marnie?
I do need to follow up. I haven't heard from him in a little while, but yes, he's still scheduled to be here next meeting.
Wonderful.
So nothing more than that. No.
Okay. Do we need to file and receive that then, Marnie, or will we just move forward?
I don't think you need to.
Okay, that's fine. All right. All right, then we will move on to our member items and referrals for staff. I'll ask each commissioner if they have items or referrals, beginning with Commissioner Woodham.
I have none.
Commissioner Wynn.
I don't have any referrals to staff. Probably just a quick comment. It's good to see the old Land Rover site leased up by Mitsubishi, so I'm hoping that sale helps with the sales tax revenue.
It should. We're going to have to share it with Hermosa, the properties in both cities, but we've been getting nothing, so this will definitely be an increase.
Well, I follow them on social media. They sold their first car, so we should see some stuff coming.
Wow.
Good to know.
That is good. All right, then Commissioner Samples.
Not really a referral to staff, I don't think, but I do have a question or a thought. We talked earlier about the actuarial reports and workers' comp, and though it doesn't show up on our agenda as an open item, it was continued over a year ago, the referral from City Council. And I'm kind of wondering and thinking out loud, should we ask our chair to approach the City Council and see if they have any interest in continuing that issue, or if we should just drop it from our own thought process?
Are you asking me, Mel?
Just an open question to the commission.
Well, in my opinion, I think we should. I would like. That was actually a point I was going to bring up as well, and basically was how do we recommend that future actuary reports? And I think this is in line with what you're saying. Include an additional report, as Mr. Glickman mentioned, breaking out the fire department to help the city officials better understand the total cost of the fire department. Was that consistent with your point, or is that a separate?
I'm not sure that going forward this needs to be done regularly, but the mere fact that the council referred that issue to us and asked for a recommendation back, we were unable to get the material we needed. I guess I was kind of surprised that our city manager didn't include that as part of this year's request in the report. And I don't know, maybe there has been conversation and the city council has decided it's a dead issue and it makes no difference. I don't know where we should go from here, but I think we should close the issue out. Either it should be removed from our agenda, or we should move forward with the request and come up with some answers and recommendations.
I think the consultant's opinion was that there's not much, if any, increased cost in simply breaking the chart out between fire and police. There's other work that could be more involved, but simply breaking it out and showing how much is allocated to each of those two departments seems to me to be worth doing on an ongoing basis. If it's simply a changing one or two slides.
That's a good
question. It was requested before, right? And we never got it. So how could we make an informed recommendation without that information?
So my thought for just that piece of having it broken out for the actuarial reports would be as we conclude you as a commission looking at the self-insurance program fund, that be one of your recommendations, just as part of the whole self-insurance fund package response back to council.
Okay, so how should we do this, Marnie?
So I'm thinking you hold on to it
Okay,
and until you formulate some recommendations back to council, saying you've taken a look at the self-insurance fund, per their direction, because that was basically a referral to you during the budget adoption process. And, we have divided it up into these 3 meetings. The time we get to the end of next meeting, you can either decide, still don't have enough information, want to go, need to see this or that before we can make any recommendations, or whether we wrap it up next meeting. You'll come up with some recommendations, and I think a different display of the actuarial report can be one of those.
well, do we have to wait until we're down to actually submitting a report to the council? Or if the commission is in agreement tonight, can we ask for that material to be prepared so that we can review it at the next meeting? And then have an answer on it when we get ready to submit to the council?
Oh, you'd like an actuarial report right away?
Yeah.
Mr. Blitzman made it sound like it wasn't that difficult, nor was it very expensive.
Right.
But of course, budget's tight. I don't know that.
Can we take it out of that 510,000 you asked what we could do?
There you go.
I think it probably won't cost more than $1,200.
I guess the question would be maybe in parallel, Marnie, if you could just even check to see how long it would take him to do it and how much it would cost. And to Mel's point, if someone can reach out to the council and say, is this still important for us to review? And then we can make the decision then, knowing that, yes, it'll take X amount of weeks and X amount of dollars to answer the question that's still pertinent to the city council, or it's not pertinent at all, or that price is too much. So it's just kind of answering those two sides of it.
Yeah, so I'd like to check with city manager's office and see how best to proceed with that.
Okay, so how are we going to include that information in some kind of feedback loop so that we as a commission have an expectation of where we're going to go with it? I mean, do we have to wait until the next meeting to get a report that says the city manager says it's too expensive, so we can't do that, and then we've got to take it up with the council? Or do we send a letter to the council immediately, copying the city manager, and say, we'd like to do this, can we have your authority?
So normally when you're writing letters to the city council, it is on an item that they've asked you to write them a letter about.
Well, they have.
And that isn't the case, at least the timing of it. So that's where I want to get some direction.
Well,
if it is a road we can proceed down, I can just email.
Okay, well, but that's my point. The city council asked for an answer. We're unable to provide them an answer. So can we provide them with a letter that says, we're unable to provide this answer, and we just had this report and we were told that it's both not difficult and not incredibly expensive. Do you want us to pursue it or not? And since they were the ones that directed us, I would think that they're the ones that should tell us whether they want us to continue or not.
I am just not sure how to
Okay.
Normally, when you write a letter, you know, again, we're coming back in a month with a draft letter that then you fine tune. You don't want to wait a month. Maybe your referral to staff is to work with the chairman to write a letter. I don't know.
What's the fastest way to
So
get them involved in helping us with the decision here?
Yeah.
They meet again on the 17th, correct?
Yeah, but there's no way to get a letter then.
Well, Marnie.
The agenda goes out tomorrow.
Right. But it would be, at the earliest, it would be the week after that. But Marnie, in the past, we've instructed staff to write a letter, working with the chair, to send to the city council. And yeah, it takes a few days to prepare, but we're not talking about anything complicated. Can we ask that staff prepare that letter and put it over our chair's signature?
Yeah, I think so. But again, I can't get it done tomorrow.
I get that. Yes.
I still have outstanding items that I have to get done for that agenda.
Right.
But for the December 1st council meeting?
Oh, that's right. Week after that is Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that would be before our next meeting. At least maybe we could get an answer back from the city council, whether they want us to even reconsider this. I think it would be worthwhile to ask the question.
And in the interim, is it possible just to email the actuarial and again, ask, what does a little bit of money mean? Like, is it $100? Is it $1,000? Is it $10,000?
Right.
So again, the council can actually then make an informed decision about the cost and the timing.
Yeah, and I can do that as part of preparing a draft.
And then we can handle that via email. We don't need to re-agendize or wait till there's some future meeting, correct? We can do that through email of everyone here.
So what I would do is I would do a draft of a letter. I would run it by you, Chairman Conroy, and take your edits. Get that letter to council. I could, as that happens, I can certainly share that letter with the full commission.
That's what we've done in the past, and I think we can, Marnie, I think we can trust you, and we can trust our chair to craft the right kind of questions. So I don't think it's something that we have to actually have back on our agenda.
I think, working with the chair to finish it can be done as a referral to staff with this item. If, majority of you are in agreement.
Yeah, and I like.
Yeah, I this way.
I like Commissioner Marin's idea that at the same time, a letter or communication of whatever type you would like go out to Mr. Glixman and find out how long and how much. I think that would be valuable information for the council and for us.
Yeah, I think it'd be required information. They're going to want to know how much it's going to cost to do it.
Yeah. But we just
Now,
gave
he
him
was-
$500,000 back.
Now, he was talking about two possibilities, one of which he said would be rather easy and inexpensive, and that was just that one schedule.
Right.
If he were going to do the full report broken out, that would be, more time consuming and more expensive. Which are you talking about?
I believe.
Go ahead.
I believe the commission, we were talking about the quick and easy and less expensive one of doing
One schedule.
sub report, just isolating the fire department.
Right. And I'm not sure if we talked about it or not, or if I'm adding to the workload, but the follow-on part of that is break out the fire department right now, and what's the 20-year anticipated costs? Is that a sinking fund or increasing, or whatever that the
So
20-year
that you're
projection might be.
talking about doing the whole report, not just the one schedule that you said would be easy.
Well, I guess
He said he could do all of the schedules with the breakout. That was how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
I don't think he meant just one table or one page. I thought he said he could easily break out the entire report for just the fire department. But that should be a part of your question, perhaps, to Mr. Glicksman.
Right.
Do you understand kind of what we're looking for then, Maureen?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful.
And you'll tell me whether I've got it right or not when you review a draft letter.
Certainly. Okay.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, we write a letter to the council. It's in their court if they want us to pursue this further. If they say no, then we close it. If they say yes, we figure out next steps. Is that our understanding?
I
I
believe
think that's the right way to close it out. I think we should get closure on it. It's our job.
Yes, and then depending on how soon we can hear back from Mr. Glicksman, we can either include in that letter to City Council saying that we already consulted and this is what the cost and the time frame would be. Otherwise, we would say that we've already reached out to Mr. Glicksman to get his estimate of the cost and the time involved.
Right.
Okay. All right. All right, then anything else? Commissioner Samples?
That's all I got. Thank
All
you.
right. Commissioner Marin, any items or referrals for staff?
Nothing in my end. No.
Wonderful. Okay, let's see. Oh, Marnie, a couple things for you. I saw on the actuary report that we did get that it was distributed to city personnel on July 22nd, 2020, but as a commission, we didn't get it until earlier this month. I was curious if in the future we could get that report sooner, perhaps 30 or 45 days after it's received by city staff, or is there some other process that it goes through before we can get it?
Well, typically it's not something you have looked at. We shared it with you, not just because you're the Budget and Finance Commission and you always get it, but in the context of council's referral to you to take a look at the self-insurance fund, and this is a component of that.
Okay, only because I know in emails leading up to tonight's meeting, you said that we needed to get our questions in writing to you because, there wasn't a lot of time. So it may be in our best interest as well as the presenter's best interest if we had a little more time to digest the material. So I would just put that as a recommendation that if we could get it, even if maybe we get it prior, 45 days before we actually speak on it, but then we'd have a little more time.
But generally you won't have an agenda item on it. This is a one-time task to look at the self-insurance fund.
And that was based on the city council making that request.
Right.
Understood. Okay. Let's see. And then, one other item. This is the second time in 2 meetings that I've heard about potentially issuing pension obligation bonds at a cost roughly half of the interest amount paid in the CalPERS. How do we formally request looking at finding out if this arbitrage opportunity or, reduction in expense opportunity actually exists? And if so, how we can start the process of issuing those bonds? I just don't want to talk about it and then it doesn't go anywhere. So I'm just curious, and I guess this is for you, Marnie, but maybe Mel or somebody, any of you other gentlemen could speak up too. How do we get, actually move the machinery on that?
I think that's a fair question. I can tell you that my understanding is it's a fairly complex formula to get you to the decision point, because it affects the city's bond ratings, finance ratings. A number of things go into it. So it's not a slam dunk that you get to save money. But in this low interest rate environment, there appear to be a lot of cities that are looking at it, and it has value. Not only that, but there's also a misconception about them, that the idea is you finance all of your future pension obligations starting today, but you pay for it over 30 years. My understanding is there are cities that are looking at taking some piece of that existing pension obligation and financing a piece of that in order, the unfunded liability that we've been sitting on for years, that we keep throwing this $10 million a year at, that's the piece that they're looking at. Maybe not paying off all of it, but paying off a portion. So apparently there are a number of different avenues in it. But I think your question is a good one. How do we get started in asking those questions?
Your referral to staff can just be a future agenda item on pension obligation bonds.
Well, when we brought this thing up at the last meeting, one of the unknowns, and still I'm not clear on it, is how that unfunded liability account grows over time. Mel, you mentioned that it grew at 5%. And if that's the figure, then that's a good piece of information, because the difference is the rate at which that grows versus the interest rate on the pension obligation bonds, I think.
Right.
But then the other piece of information is that 2.5% something that the city could borrow at? And
right.
That would require a question to be put to an investment banker. What can we issue bonded debt at? So those are the kinds of questions we have to come up with. And then we do simply a spreadsheet analysis and say how much are we saving each year. We've heard from a couple of folks that the idea of using debt to pay off debt is a little dicey. But if we're saving a substantial amount of money, then it's worth looking at, and that's what we don't know yet. But my thought all along has been that when we have the person from CalPERS, that's one of the questions I want to ask is how is that unfunded liability growing year after year? If we stop paying it at all, how much does it grow, irrespective of the interest of the rate of return on their fund? That's the other variable that we can't control. If CalPERS makes less than 7% year after year, that's going to grow no matter what we do.
The CalPERS presentation I expect will be very interesting. It was certainly an eye-opener when we had the last one. But that unfunded liability is something that we can't not pay. That is part of a defined benefit program. And if CalPERS runs short on money, they reach out to all of the participants, which is our city, and they say, send us more money. And we just have to take that out of the general fund. So it's a complicated formula, though, because it also affects, or can affect, I guess, the bond rating of the city and the opportunity for us to issue other bonds in the future to do other work that we think might need to be done. So it sounds like it's fairly complex.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet, Mel, you said some other cities are looking into it. And
Yep.
I thought it was interesting that Steve Deals said that, well, first of all, it didn't sound to me like he thought there was a lot of value in it. But furthermore, he said that he hasn't heard anyone mentioning it to him in the hallways or something like that. So it sounds to me like nobody's considering it at this point, and nobody's necessarily interested in considering it. So again, if other cities are considering it, there may be merits to it. How do we get our city to look into that. I think that we can make the recommendation, but it certainly wouldn't be up to us to do the legwork. That would be up to the professionals because it is a complex issue.
My notes from last meeting said that Manhattan Beach was issuing a pension obligation bond and that Torrance was issuing some sort of a sales tax anticipation bond. So I don't know that for sure, but again, my notes said that there are two cities that join us that are in the process of looking at this.
Manhattan.
Yeah, I think Torrance being further along than Manhattan Beach.
On November 4th at the city council meeting, Manhattan Beach received a presentation and recommendation from their finance subcommittee that they adopt a pension obligation bond. And you can look that up online and you can get the presentation. For them, it appears that it works. For us, I don't know if it would work, but I think it's worth looking at.
Would it make sense to maybe reach out to the department that made the presentation and if not look at their presentation, maybe even invite one of them to
They use a different financial advisor than we do.
Oh, okay. It was a third party. It wasn't a presentation made by their group. I got you.
Oh,
Well,
no, this is from their finance subcommittee. If you go on City of Manhattan Beach website and look up pension obligation bond, you can get a copy of the presentation.
I'll take a look at that. But again, I think that's a good first step. But I guess I would like, I just want things to, I know things move slowly often, and that's by design because, you know, we as a city, we don't want to make rash decisions. But conversely, we see neighboring cities doing it. Manhattan Beach is not as far along, but that could be a good thing because we're not that far behind them then. I think we all need to be creative and think about ways that we can learn more about this and put it in front of the decision makers, the city council and city staff, and look at if it's a viable solution or a partial solution to help us out.
Right.
Okay, so I don't know if that was a referral, Marnie, but
I took it as a referral that you would like pension obligation bonds to be an agenda item in the future.
okay, thank you. All right.
Just curious on our city charter. I don't know the answer to this, but issuing a bond, does it require any public vote or anything in our city?
It depends on the type of bond. Both the way Torrance and Manhattan Beach have done it. Pension obligation bonds do not, because it's a debt for a debt, I believe is the reasoning behind it. And Torrance using lease revenue bonds, that does not require a vote. Basically, you're not assessing the property owners to make the bond debt service payment. Once you're having the property owners pay an assessment, then it does have to go to a vote.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have anything? Seeing nothing, no other items, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seeing a motion in a second, we'll do one last roll call vote. Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Nguyen.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Thank you, Marnie, Doug, Tammy, and